Hi, you're listening to Driven E-commerce at Work, the podcast where we bring in conversations with the e-commerce experts. We also put together some interesting content from different places, including our monthly e-sessions, speaker series, and anything that's related to e-commerce for manufacturing and distribution. If you're here for the first time, I would highly encourage you to go and subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Good morning, and you're listening to the Driven E-commerce at Work podcast. I'm Shivakumar, your host. So today we've got an interesting guest who's into actually the conversational commerce, conversational marketing space. So it's Stephen Call, founder of Needle Movement, a digital strategy company that helps the e-commerce brands nail their marketing. Stephen, good to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm great, Shiva. It's great to be here.
Cool. So how's your morning so far? How's the situation, and how have you been going through all these 6 to 8 month phase?
It's a good question. I think well, with the pandemic, I actually today I learned a slang word for the quarantine and COVID that the kids are using. They call it quarantine or quarantine. So if you hear that phrase, you might recognize it. But let's see. Um, I think with e-commerce, I think we're well trained for what has happened in 2020 because we're taught not to get too comfortable in our seat, and we're taught that where there's disruption in a business, there's opportunity. So and many situations were put in. Many companies were put in the same situation, for this. So just with that mentality, you don't get stuck on why isn't my life completely the same. You get more focused on, okay, this is a different, place I'm in right now. How can I take advantage of that? How can I do things? So I was one thing I was really excited about. So I mean, I'm trying not to bitch and moan about 2020 and regret the things that I couldn't do. I'm just trying to find a couple of wins out there. So fortunately for me, I was fortunate to have in-laws that are in Colorado. So I had access to stay. So in a normal year, when I would visit my in-laws, it would be like 6 days tops. I'd spend 2 days traveling. By the time I was even comfortable being in a place, I'd have to schlep back home and go back to New York. But this year, got to spend 10 weeks in Colorado, which would have never have happened in a normal year. So I think for everybody and for your audience, I think there's great opportunities for online learning right now because there's free classes. There's whatever you want to learn. I mean, I think we're going to talk about conversation marketing, and I'll confess, a lot of this was something that I learned in a course. Um, you know, I do have 20 years of e-commerce experience, but I'm always learning new things, and I see the need for it. But a lot of it I've learned online through various places.
Yeah, right, exactly. So this is definitely the right time for all of us to experiment. And I think, every other businesses will understand the situation. And even if we make mistakes, I think they are good to, kind of like live with it.
Right.
So before we get onto the topic, I actually wanted to understand this one thing. What is conversational commerce? And since this is what you've been doing, it's always good to hear from, the person who's doing that for a decade.
Yeah, it's a good question. And there's a few names for it that I think your audience might recognize. Some people call it conversation commerce, conversation marketing, or even chat commerce has been used. It goes into what marketing is and how it's changing. So I think many of us are used to people throw around a lot of buzzwords with marketing. Back in 2015, I remember everybody saying marketing is about storytelling, telling your story, and so that people can consume that information and understand it. And now I think we've done a really good job in marketing of trying to humanize brands. So with social media, it did that, where now we see our brands as people. And I think that's one reason why Generation Z has such high expectations for brands, because they see them as people and they want them to be good corporate citizens. So we call our companies human names. And there's a company called Casper for bedding. There's a company called Andy that does swimwear. So it's a natural extension of this for us to want to chat and get to know um, these people or these companies, to have a more intimate and deep relationship. So conversation marketing it's enabling a two-way conversation between the buyer and seller that can scale because it has a high degree of automation. I think it also resembles the flea market or the open market, where we would buy things and sell things through conversations and through having a nice relationship with the person that was selling. An advantage of conversation commerce. I mean, I think we're going to talk about. I think it's 4 channels that really get into conversation marketing right now. It's email, and everyone knows email. It's been around for a long time. Live chat on websites, SMS, and Facebook Messenger. Like, those are the ones it primarily gets involved with. I think the advantage of having this two-way conversation between the buyer and seller is it shortens the sales cycle, because there's this saying that you need 15 touch points to take a potential customer from not knowing anything to purchasing from your company. So those touch points now could be a conversational chat where the buyer, they can discuss what they're most concerned about, their objections, and the seller can give persuasive information to convert them.
Mm-hmm.
you know
So, how has SMS marketing evolved over the last 10 years, and how consumers are actually looking at it, especially, I would say, in the B2B space?
yeah, it's seen a I just want to say one thing about conversation marketing that's huge is that it covers what's called owned media. And the great thing about owned media is when a company owns the list, then you're not paying a middle person like an advertiser. So that's why I think the other cool thing about conversation marketing is the return on investment tends to be higher, because you're not paying a bounty for each site visit, which is what pay-per-click essentially is. I mean, there's totally a use for that, but that is a critical advantage. So going into SMS, I just look at the past year and see, in the past 2 years, I've seen incredible growth in the adoption of SMS marketing, because I remember how it was in 2018, and even last year, and now there's more providers that are out there, but I'm hearing about SMS marketing providers that have thousands of clients on a particular e-commerce platform. So this past year has definitely been a transition year, where more and more people, where it's not just the really early adopters. We're in the early adopter phase. Most people aren't doing it. There's still a huge advantage to going in right now. It's actually a nice point right now with SMS marketing, because there's enough companies that are doing it that your company would not be the first one to do it. And there is also a playbook of tactics, so you're not flying blind. Like, you can look out there, and there are plenty of SMS marketing playbooks and early best practices that are set up. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, and I just had a conversation with a provider called Postscript that does some work in Shopify, and they're just saying, the quote that I heard was, in 12 months, SMS is going to be so popular that even my mom is going to know what I'm doing now. so so that's the prognostication, but it's growing a lot, especially in the past 12 months.
Mm-hmm. So, how does it actually, compare with the traditional email marketing? I mean, are consumers ready to opt in using their mobile number instead of the email? Does that even works?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because SMS is just known for the big advantage is that you don't have an inbox. It's a more personal channel. And because you don't have that inbox, that means the open rates and the click-through rates are much higher. So people on SMS talk about 80% open rates and click-through rates of 30% and up. Just because you don't, a lot of emails don't even reach you, or they're in a different tab on Gmail. So that is an advantage to it. It's also more personal, and I think that that's, some people. It means you have to be more careful with your messaging. It means that if you're not, I think it keeps companies honest, because if you get an SMS message that you don't like, you react stronger to it.
Mhm.
You really hate it, where I don't think you really care about all the you don't get mad about all the messages that are in your spam folder. But you get a message from someone you didn't sign up with and you don't know, you're like, WTF, like, get me off this list immediately.
Mhm. Mhm. So I mean, I've been seeing this especially in the B2B space. They're ready and they're very good to handle the email list, and they're okay to do the email marketing stuff. It's been there for like 20 years, right?
Totally.
And they've been trying to go to the social media. Even they're okay to start with the messenger. It's still been there in the B2B space. It's very good. But one thing I'm still not sure why people in the B2B space are not ready to go for the SMS marketing. So why do you think that companies in the B2C space, if you really look at it, so like you said, for the abandoned cart, they are seeing like 90% conversion if they go for the SMS instead of email marketing. But in B2B, I still see that gap, okay, so does it really work? Things like that.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. So I guess I think it's important for businesses to have an early adopter mentality right now, because you just look at that. Like, I look at things like social media advertising, and I remember 2014. Um, and it's a very comparable time to where conversation marketing is now. And then I remember 2014 when businesses had this test of, am I going to do this new scary marketing called Facebook advertising? Lookalike audiences. I've never seen this before. Should I do this or should I just wait? Um, and I think right now we're seeing so many changes in digital marketing that it's important for brands to, if you're the owner, I think I understand where people are hesitant, but it's good to have an early adopter vibe in your community, because like these people in 2014 who were so hesitant to go onto Facebook advertising, they all came 3 to 4 years later, and they did it for less of an ROI. So when you're in that early adopter wave, you get the higher ROI. Like, there are companies like Movement Watches, and there's one called Pura Vida bracelets, but there are a lot of companies in the early 2010s that just really embraced social media. They weren't afraid of it because they saw the potential to communicate with their customers. So you really have, so with SMS, it you're not you wouldn't be the first one to do it. So I think it's a very good idea I think everyone, like, the person at Postscript said, I think everyone is going to be doing this in 2 years, and the earlier that you get onto it, the more you can learn the platform. Like, I think with competition and this mainstream early adopter wave is what is more fun than watching your competitors asleep at the wheel, not doing something that you're doing. Marketing is always about, if you're doing the same marketing as your competitor, then you're bidding for the same person. But you want to get around that. You want to find new things that your competitors aren't doing. So I think if not as many people are on SMS, great. Like, that's a channel that you can have that gives you a strategic advantage.
Good. So let's get on to the core. So how to build an SMS list? Where to begin, or what is the trick to ask for your first-time visitor to provide his mobile number?
The bad news about SMS is that you start from zero. I should say the good news is that there are more ways to grow your list. on SMS than there ever have been. The number one way to get your SMS list pretty quickly is to ask people on your email list and give them incentive to sign up for SMS. This is something that you could do a dedicated email blast on and just say, hey, we just went on to SMS. Want to sign up for this incentive? So that is a very, so you can send a dedicated blast. You can also put a banner at the top or bottom persistently where you offer that, where you mention SMS and that you're growing your list. And a lot of email service providers have this feature where you can put a block of text or put a block inside of an email devoted to SMS sign up. And that can make it easy. That's one way to get it quick. Your website, the same thing with pop-ups. There are companies now that are doing SMS and email signups through a pop-up. So you can either do SMS only as an incentive or combine the two. The third thing is to, for a lot of companies, let's see, our community overall is very spread out among all the different marketing channels. So it's like a diaspora where there are people on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. You have your email list. You have the people that visit the website. You can find ways to cross-pollinate those followings. Where you can, like on your Instagram, there are ways in SMS to do, like there's a tool called keywords where you can give someone tell someone on your Instagram channel, hey, we're if you type in these words to this number and we'll sign you up. And the advantage of that approach is, what's interesting is with SMS now, you just see it everywhere. Like I was watching the Video Music Awards on MTV recently, even watching the two political parties. And they're all and they're spreading this text message because I remember back in the day when it used to be, oh, go to our website. But with SMS, you can get someone to a targeted location and have them sign up. So it's much better than just saying, go to my website and do this. But those are the ways that you can grow the list. And a lot of it is just telling everyone the SMS offering and going around your channels and collecting. And some people might say, well, they're on email. Why do they need to be on SMS? The thing is that some people are email people, some people are SMS people, and they will naturally go to the channel that they want to talk to you on. And that's the advantage of having people on both.
Yeah, right, exactly. So just don't go for channels that works for your company. Instead, go for the channels that works for the consumer, the customer. Sometimes, they are in like 5 or 6 different channels, but if you're on Facebook, sometimes, that actually works. If you're on Facebook and then if you're targeting over there, it could convert instead of focusing on email or SMS or things like that. So if there is a positive, I'm sure there is a negative as well. We talked about the conversion, first-time visitor conversion. So let's say what kind of content do they really like? I mean, what kind of content pushes them for, like more unsubscriptions?
Okay. So for SMS,
Yeah.
all right. So SMS is a sensitive channel. You can get away with murder on email. Okay. Let's acknowledge that companies send a lot of stuff that's interesting to them, but not really interesting to the person. And you can get away with that on email. Like with email, you can send 15 times a month, but with SMS, you send less times because you don't want to tick off the person. And you want to send, it has to be content that's going to be useful. So, the way to create unsubscription is to SMS people a lot and to send a message that's not that interesting to them. If someone hasn't visited your website in 6 months and you send them an SMS about, new arrivals, they might not be as interested because they haven't visited your website in 6 months. So it's, they're, if they're not, I think it has to, because it's such a personal channel, like you have a shortcut to that customer, but the trade-off is you got to send them good stuff.
Exactly. So does that mean that we can be a little upfront about selling through the SMS compared to what we've been doing in the email marketing space? Let's say, hey, there's a new product that's going to come in next week. Do you want to take a look at it? Things like that. Can we do that on SMS, like a typical
Yes.
straightforward selling?
Yes. Product launches can work very well. I think with SMS, people also segment the list because, you know, that sort of message is about a product launch. The first people that should get it are the people that have bought repeat times. Are that top 20% of your list, because they're going to buy. And I think, with people that are not as engaged, you experiment more with the tag, with the message to see what's going to get them through.
Yeah, good. So I think we talked about SMS a little bit. I think it's good. So
Mm,
let's get onto the internet world. Most of the younger generations are in social media and are using Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and other part of the country. So how do
hmm
we, treat the messenger while
Right,
SMS and the email marketing are already there, right? So how do we treat the messenger now?
right. The So for those three channels, with most people, they're not going to be on all three of them. Facebook, Facebook Messenger is just another way to reach more people that you haven't reached through email or you haven't reached through SMS. And that's how it should be treated. Um, and you're just playing into the they're not it's not going to be it's about layering messages. It's not going to be the same message. It's not going to be the same exact marketing creative that's put in email, that's put in SMS, that's put on Facebook. I think the same message can happen. It just needs to be tweaked to the advantages of those channels. But the answer is just to layer um, to layer things. Like, you wouldn't send to all three channels at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. So how does the opt-in process work in the messenger? Like you said, I think let's say when someone visit the website, not
Yeah.
everyone is going to visit the messenger, right? So either they go
Yeah.
for email opt-in, or like you said, I think they'll still go for the SMS opt-in. So what is the point where they visit a Facebook Messenger, or how do we actually make them okay, so just go ahead and follow us on Facebook or opt in for the messenger and things like that?
Yeah. So the advantage of Messenger is, again, there's no inbox, so there's less friction than email. And like SMS, it's not just one way to grow the list. There are additional ways. Um, but people can improve their Messenger list by creating interaction. And a lot of times, Messenger content, I mean, it's of all the platforms that we're talking about, it's the most interactive one. So I think with Messenger, when we talk about automated conversations and chatbots, it sounds like we're all going to become robots, but it's actually very much the opposite, because you can make Messenger content very entertaining. And you just ask people, I think the key to the Messenger content is you get signups by getting interactivity. If you send a message and people don't respond, then you're limited in the messages that you can actually send to them. And so the key is that with all your messaging there, you're trying, that's why people will mention sales, or mention giving people, do you want to become a member so that we can give you this discount? And then people will respond to it, and they, get enlisted, into Messenger on it. But there are also, the rules are changing a lot as well. So, and they pretty much change every 6 months. So you have to keep track of it on it. And that's why with Messenger, like I do feel sometimes that email for many companies has been an in-house channel. It's a do-it-yourself channel. And more that is changing. But I think something like Messenger it's good to find outside hands because it's just like SEO that with all the things that people are doing inside their company, I doubt that they're really keeping up on what Facebook announced at its developer conference or the changes that inevitably happen. But so I mean I think the opt-in process is there's a lot of it's not so much as an opt-in screen as it is with email, but it's really based on once you get someone to engage with a messenger bot, then you're able to send in a certain capacity messages to them. And there's also you can do paid marketing on the messenger channel as well.
Mhm. So I've seen companies using, Messenger instead of chatbot. So you also
Yeah.
touched upon that. So how does it actually work from the consumer perspective? Do they really like, having a messenger, or do they really like having a chatbot where you have
hmm
this sort of like pre-built conversations through the chatbot, and you don't really need a human being behind that, right? And sometimes, let's say if they are in a product page, or if they were somewhere else, they got stuck. So this can pretty much, help them to navigate to a different page which may not work through the messenger. So how do you compare messenger and chatbot? What actually helps an e-commerce store to push for a sale or to build that conversation?
Right. Yeah. Great question. People in January of this year, I was very surprised when I was doing some research. What opened my eyes about chatbots is hearing a poll about how most people did not mind the chatbots. They didn't mind talking to them. And the reason is because they were sick of waiting. They didn't want to talk to a real human being if that meant they had to wait 70 minutes on the line to talk to them. So if a chatbot could do it in 5 minutes, so it's that convenience that governs the reception that people have. Like I mean, for chatbots now I know there's recently been a feature on some chat platforms where you don't have to there's a guest mode on the chatbot. So you don't have to be signed up into Facebook Messenger. There's another way through to do it. But to go into, actually, I should get back to the automations part that a chatbot is only going to answer a certain percentage. Your frequently asked questions. There are going to be things that the chatbot cannot answer. And that is good too, because then the chatbot can hand off to a human. And most platforms have this functionality where if there is a detailed product question or merchant question that the chatbot can't answer, then then it goes to the customer success team. And now they're getting targeted questions. They're not just answering the same dumb FAQs 100 times that a canned response could handle. So it's definitely not it's not 100% or nothing. I think the chatbots are trying to handle, some of the top funnel type of questions.
Good. Yeah, I think as long as we're straightforward and we're being honest, I think that helps sometimes. So, like you said, I think consumer doesn't mind chatting with a chatbot, or at least if they have some sort of like answer, instead of waiting for 10 minutes to talk to a customer
Yeah.
representative, right? So that's the hardest part. I can't wait for 10 minutes and then order a product or things like that. Just for clarifications, I don't want to wait. Then think about how the after sales support is going to work, right? So that's definitely going to be a little harder. So coming back to the email marketing,
hmm
for someone who's just trying to get started after hearing this episode, let's say if they already have a list, right? So how to clean up the email list and find who the real audience interested in your content.
So with cleaning up the email list, we have to change the way that we look at email in many cases because it is not about, I think in a lot of companies, we think I have a 20,000 person email list. If I send to 10,000 people, then I'm only sending to half my people. I'm going to get half the sales. But you always have to remember the 80-20 rule of business, that 80% of your business is coming from 20% of your customers. It could be even more. So with that, that's where segmentation becomes very important. Now, with email, like the total number of email subscribers you have is a vanity metric, because just from my experiences with my clients, there are just a lot of people that haven't opened an email in 1 year or 6 months. So, the way you clean up that list is take out the deadbeats. They're deadbeats because these are people that are hurting your email deliverability. There once in a while you can, if you have a huge announcement, you can send it. But you got to think about the logic. I mean, think about the math of it, where let's just say you have a customer that you've sent 30 emails and they haven't opened, clicked, or bought from any of them. If you send the 31st email, what are the chances that that's going to do anything? You're 0 for 30. So you can be smart with that. But so to clean up your list too, create engagement lists, like creating a VIP list. Those people will respond. Creating people that have opened or clicked on emails in the last 3 months, in the last 6 months. Like, that's how you clean it up. There's other tactics that people use to clean up lists, like sunsetting names. So let's just say someone hasn't opened your email up in, like, I don't know, 18 months. You can send them an email that says, we're cleaning up our list. Would you like to still receive this? Because it does, if you keep them on the list, and let's just say they reported as spam or they don't open, the open rates are sent to the ISPs. So Gmail is looking at the open rate of your sender and saying, should I open this up to everybody who received it? Because, and if you only have I think the things to watch out for is you should really have an open rate over 20%. If you don't have an open rate of over 20%, then it could be hurting. It could mean that some people aren't getting those messages. And I'll tell you something, when I look at my spam folder, it's not just crazy companies or fly-by-night companies. I see big companies sometimes that show up in the spam folder. So you got to watch out for that.
Cool. Perfect, Stephen. So before we wrap up the episode, one last final question. So how to create a strategy for all these channels that actually work together? I mean, talking about the whole conversational commerce, SMS, email, and messenger and chatbot. So without making, consumers feel like it's overkill.
Right. I think with marketing, everything works together. So it's, I think with conversation marketing, if digital marketing were a volleyball team, email, conversation marketing, SMS would be like, they would be setting things up. They're not spiking the ball. They're setting things up because they're opening lines of communication. Really, it's the content outside of the conversation marketing that's going to convert people. Because all you're doing with email, SMS, Messenger is you're reminding people you're there, and you're striking a likable conversation with them. But I think with right now, we're familiar with email automations, I think, like, where you set up certain flows where someone signs up to a list, they get sent a series of welcome emails, or things like abandoned cart. The key here is just to layer your communications, that, because you want to find out where, what that person's favorite channel is. So the way that we don't bombard people is you monitor you monitor what content they're looking for. I think that the friction always happens when we try to send things that people aren't interested in, but then it's also sending at different times. And with, because we know the flow of email marketing, it's a similar flow that happens with Facebook Messenger or SMS. We're layering campaigns and we're customizing them to the channel.
Mm-hmm. Perfect, Stephen. So where do you want the listeners to go? Give them some links and tell us a little bit about your company so they can just go ahead and check them out.
I appreciate that. So let's see. So I think the first place to go would be, the name of my company is needlemovement.com. Needle Movement as in move the needle. And Needle Movement provides done-for-you services in email marketing, SMS, and Facebook Messenger. And really what this came out of, actually, we were originally in digital strategy. And then we just found that owned media and conversation marketing was converting so well that we really wanted to focus our efforts in that location. So you can go to needlemovement.com and, for all your listeners, I'm happy to to have a conversation, to do, a free growth audit to identify where the opportunities could be for you. A way to reach me personally, you can find me on social media. You can also find me over email. Send a message to hello@needlemovement.com. I look at every email and I will answer them for you.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much, Stephen. And thanks for doing this. Hope you'll have a great upcoming Q4.
I wish you a wonderful Q4 as well, Shiva. It's great to be on the show. I had a blast.
Cool. Take care and you have a good day. Bye. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of Driven E-Commerce at Work podcast. This show is brought to you by DCCap, the company well known for its e-commerce product suites for B2B distributors. Make sure you subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Catch you guys very soon with another interesting episode. Until next time, see you.